Hello and welcome to On the Table. My name is Rebecca and this is Corie and Rachel, and today on the table we're going to be talking about feminism. So before we get into this great topic, we're going to first do a little icebreaker question, as we typically do. So if you had to create a new flavor of ice cream, what flavor would you create?
Okay. Okay. No idea.
I know.
Great,
okay,
go.
so one of my favorite chocolate bars, it's not really a chocolate bar at all. It's a candy bar.
Okay.
And it's called Eat More. You know, it's like a yellow package and it's like a toffee filled with nuts.
No, I have literally never heard of that.
Divine.
I've
I
never
would
had
like
one.
to try an ice cream version of that.
Okay.
It's very like toffee, it's like sweet but not like sucker punch sweet.
Right.
Nice.
And it has lots of nuts in it. It's really tasty. It's very like goopy chewy. Like you bite it and it can stretch out.
Okay.
But it
Wow.
doesn't like stick
I've never
in your
even
teeth.
heard of it before.
Oh man, I'll get
Like
you one.
ever?
I'll get you one too.
Okay.
Just see. We'll have a taste testing
Oh, I'll taste
party,
test.
and we'll just see.
See if we can
Because
make
it's
it
one of
into an
those
ice cream.
candy bars where you love it or you hate it, and people have really strong reactions against it.
good.
Though I don't know why, because it's not weird like black licorice or anything.
Yeah, which is disgusting. So, ew.
Depending on the kind of
No,
licorice.
no licorice. None. None of it is yummy. It's
Not even the red stuff.
No, none of it.
I like the red
Ugh.
stuff.
I really like it.
I like it's like baby licorice.
Yeah.
it's
See,
like
okay, but
it's sugar with a little
Yeah.
bit of licorice.
No.
Right? Black licorice is just like punch you with
a
a
lot.
licorice.
It's a
root.
lot.
It's just disgusting.
I'm totally on a licorice kick right now. It's one of the things I'm craving. I'm like, I just
Yay.
I
always
like
want.
licorice root in my tea. I'm up for that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Especially if it's mixed with other things.
Yeah,
then
like-
it's not,
yeah, marshmallow leaf and things
yeah,
like that.
you
Oh,
gotta,
so good.
It's good.
No.
Can't
No.
relate.
We've lost Rebecca.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, what about you guys
I'm
and your
out.
ice cream flavors?
What about you?
I think I'm a big fan of chocolate, and I really enjoy. Sometimes we'll just do like an ice cream at home. It'll either be chocolate or vanilla, and I'll throw a lot of stuff in it, like peanuts or chocolate sauce, or usually a combination. I like sprinkles, so I probably would want to come up with some sort of like sundae type of ice
Nice.
cream that
Like
would
a mash
just like
of some kind?
a mash of something,
It's good.
and it would be super chocolatey.
That's also
You
good.
can't really go wrong
You
with
can't go
super
wrong.
chocolate.
You
can't.
can't. Like fudgy and yum.
For mine, I don't
Now
know if it
want
already
one.
exists. It might. But if it
Okay.
does, I've never heard of it. I would love to try like a watermelon flavor of ice cream.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I know strawberry ice cream's a thing, but is
And
watermelon?
you don't like licorice, but you're okay with
I
watermelon
love
ice
watermelon
cream?
though.
Not to be like, that's
makes
kind of
sense.
weird.
But I think I might have been scarred
Okay.
by licorice because growing up in a Dutch family, you have those like, we call them drippies,
Yeah.
which is like candies, and it's like licorice and salt or something, and it's
Yeah.
like,
No, I don't like those.
ugh, it's just the worst. So I
Those
like
are rough.
growing
My
up
mom likes
smelling
those.
those and
I don't like those.
being
They're very
around
strong.
them. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I'm
no.
just out. Like I think my taste buds were like shut down. It's not gonna happen.
So you want something fresh, like watermelon.
Like watermelon.
Something cleansing.
Wouldn't it be good though? Like if it wasn't too sweet, but just
Yeah.
like a good watermelon
Yeah.
flavor. I don't know if it exists. If it does, comment below the video and let us
Yeah.
know.
Let us know.
I don't think it does.
I don't think so.
Like
either.
there aren't very many fruits in ice cream.
Yeah, there's maybe a sherbet of some sort.
Yeah, maybe. And it would be watermelon flavored, but it wouldn't be ice cream.
Yeah,
So we could try inventing it, but
Yeah,
it wouldn't be worth it.
totally.
I'm sorry.
We could give it a go.
I don't think I want to do that. Okay, so moving on to feminism.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit first about the history of feminism, because there's
Sure.
feminism today, but what we see
Yes.
today is not always what it was.
Yeah.
So right now we're in the third, moving into the fourth wave of feminism. But the first wave of feminism started in the 19th, 20th century with the suffrage movement, which was about the right to vote for women,
Yes.
for land rights, inheritance, and abolishing slavery, depending on where you lived. Second wave started in the 60s. And this is where it kind of changed direction. It became more about women's liberation for reproductive rights and abortion,
Yes.
rather than because we had gained the right to vote at this point. And then the third wave, which started in the 90s, is a continuation of and more of a reaction to perceived failures of the second wave. And we're kind of moving now into or some have said we're moving into the fourth wave, which is a lot to do with gender identity and our current cultural climate in regards to those types of issues.
Right.
So feminism hasn't always looked the same. So there's some questions that we could ask about it. So we'll just start with the first question because obviously we're Christians and we want to take this back to the Bible. So would we say that God is a feminist?
I think that's a funny question.
It is a funny question.
Because I don't think that God is pro any human movement.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that, you can't just say God is insert human.
Yes.
You can type it into Google and you'd be surprised what comes out though.
Yes,
That's
because
true.
we like doing that as
You could
humans.
do that with most things.
We
Yes, you
like
could.
categorizing things, and
Yes.
we always want to categorize God, and we
We're
always
big on
want to
labels.
have some sort of authority that we can throw in our opponent's face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm diametrically opposed to using God that way because I don't
Yeah.
think that he can rightly be used that way. So
I agree.
I would not say that God is a feminist. I have many complicated things to say about God and women, and some very simple things to say about God
Yeah.
and women, but I would not say that God is a feminist, as I would not say that God is pro patriarchal society either.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things about God that I would say he is not, just to be safe, because he's
Yeah.
God.
Right. I think
And
the
he's
hard part
high
with
above.
that question too is I think feminism has changed so much through the years as to what it actually stands for. Like,
And
if
there are
you're
even
gonna-
different branches of it today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're going to look for like a definition of like, this is what feminism is, I don't even think it holds true today. Because
Right.
like when I was even looking up a definition, it's supposed to be equality between men and women.
Yes.
But to say that's what it is today, I really think you're stretching it. I think that's not what it's
Yeah.
become anymore.
Yeah, there's more to it.
There's a lot more to it. So again, like if you're going with the base of like, yes, feminism is for equality, well, like God's already created men and women equal.
Yeah.
So
Genesis 1 and 2 says it.
people get that idea from the Bible.
Yeah.
So I think that you're doing it backwards when you ask that question.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, no, because I don't think you could say that God is a feminist, but God already established women as equal to men
In value.
in value,
Absolutely.
in worth.
Yeah.
Purpose may be different. Physiologically, we are different, and
Yeah.
there are people who want to deny today that we are physically different, but we are.
But even your
Yeah.
roles are different. Like if feminism had started as a movement to be like, you know what, the movement we want to make is that men and women are both created in the image of God. We're both seen as equals. I feel like it's something that I would have such a different attitude towards.
Right.
But since that's not what it was about, it was never about the inherent value that God's placed on us, because he has placed value on us equally between men and women.
Right.
And yes, we have different roles, and yes, we have these different things. But right away, it was about, you know, what women can gain, and I think that it hasn't stopped being that. And not that they were wrong. I think when they
Right.
started movements, I think there's a lot of things there that are not wrong, but it's kept going
Yeah,
on
'cause you
what women
can't-
can gain over men,
It'd
rather
be really
than
hard to say that things
equal.
like ending slavery is wrong, or having
or
the
even
right to
voting,
vote.
or like
Or being
simple
considered
things.
a human.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
having
like, those
property,
are-
or whatever it is. Like
those are
none
good
of those
things.
things. Yeah, none of those
Women
things
should
are
be
wrong.
able to inherit.
It's about
Totally.
protecting human life, and
Yeah.
that's being considered a person in order to
Yeah.
have any sort of legal protection.
Yeah.
As any society based on Christian law should be, or Christian morality, which is what our society claimed
Yes.
it
Yeah.
was. Well, okay, well then put your money where your mouth is,
Yeah.
and treat
Yeah.
everyone equally, including anyone who is being oppressed.
Yeah.
Totally.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So here, this is where this conversation is going to just kind of could explode, and often does if you're paying attention to the topic of feminism in the world at all.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
the second wave began pushing reproductive rights, which is kind of a misnomer, because really it was the rights to have an abortion, and that's not really reproduction, because an abortion is
Ending
ending
Yes.
reproduction.
Exactly.
Reproduction has already taken place. So that's kind of, it's misleading to say that,
Yeah.
because you had just said protecting everyone's rights.
Yeah.
And that's where feminism for me really crosses the line. I was with them for first wave. There's a lot of things I think that were good there, but when it comes to second wave, now you want the right to murder the unborn. I'm not okay with that. I don't think terminating pregnancy is
and
okay.
they want to have it so that you can have sex and have no consequences.
Right.
And that's not something I can ever get behind, because biblically, you're never going to not have consequences for that. Even if you don't have a child from it, there's still consequences if that's outside of marriage, right?
So here's where I get a little,
or even inside marriage, because there are many cases
for sure.
where people are, it doesn't matter. Like there's a lot of different situations.
Yeah.
But we're still making blanket laws that say it doesn't matter what the situation is.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that a lot this year. There have been a lot of law changes globally on this topic in different nations.
Yeah. And so here's where I get controversial even within the Christian world.
Yeah. Let's do this.
Because I believe, morally speaking, that I believe that God is against abortion. He's against so-called reproductive rights, because there's an ideal way of the way the world was supposed to work.
Right.
And God values human life, and God gives life. And that's a biblical principle. So we don't have the right to decide. We are not God.
Yep.
However, because our society, because we're based on Christian principles, we try to uphold those. But since the beginning of time, even in the ancient world, abortion was a thing.
Yep.
Even very terrible forms that are still practiced today, like leaving a child out in the elements to die. As a society, is it right for us to just ban a practice that we know is going to happen regardless?
Right.
Do we instead choose to legislate? So I believe there's a difference between what we can say morally is right and acceptable, and what we can legally do.
Right.
So personally, I don't advocate for a banning of abortion. And this is, like, I get very, in the Christian world, it's a very controversial
It's very
stand.
controversial. Yeah.
Because by me saying to someone, you're not allowed to do it, doesn't actually change anything.
Right.
But advocating for legislation so you can't do live-term abortions, you can't do late-term abortions.
Yeah.
There's a cutoff. Like, those are battles that I feel are winnable.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's portraying the morality of God, but in a different way and in a merciful way.
Right.
But I know a lot of people disagree with me as Christians, and I totally understand.
Yeah.
And I know this is an issue with feminism, but it's also a side issue that we could do a whole other podcast on this topic.
You could totally do it.
So I know I don't want to steer the conversation in that way, but that's kind of a nuance that we have to think about when we're talking about feminism.
Totally.
Because
It goes there.
it goes there.
It goes there.
And I
It goes
think with
there.
feminism too, I think, like, bring it back to specifically with feminism too, it's one of the issues that I have with feminism is that I feel like it's fighting against women. Like, as much as feminism is supposed to be promoting women, it is fighting against the very things that women, biblically anyway, are meant to be. So, like, it fights for murder, it fights for abortion, it fights for promiscuity in the way that it wants to just, let your body be your body, let it be whatever you want it to be. It's fighting for a hatred of the body, that you have to look a specific way and be a specific way. And I think there's so many things tied into feminism with that really, I feel like feminism is fighting against women at times, sometimes almost as much as it started fighting for women. And that's really where feminism, especially now in today's day and age, takes a turn sometimes for me, where I'm like, I don't know that I can ever agree with feminism, because one, I find it really hard to define, and two, I find it something that it's not what it started out as anymore. It's no longer about equal men and women's rights. That's not what it really is.
Not anymore.
When you look at it, not anymore. So again, like, when it's fighting for those things, I find it really hard to back it in any degree.
Right.
There is something to be said, though, too, for supporting, I think God legislates human behavior. I think we see that in the scriptures, which is where I get my basis, side note, branch, was where I get from my basis for legislating abortion, even though it's not right. There's a lot of things in the Bible that God just legislates. He doesn't just cut off outright, which I think is a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
Where was I going this? But sorry, I lost my train of thought. That's okay. It's gone, guys. I'll get it back. I'll get it back.
That's okay.
You just let us know.
I will. I will.
Okay, so Galatians 3:28, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither slave nor free, male nor female, for you're all one in Jesus Christ. That that's comes out of Christianity. The idea that we're equal stems from the Bible. And I think it's really interesting the way the world is kind of spinning this. And feminism has entered into the church. It's entered into Christianity. I was reading some interesting articles by Christians who claim to be feminists, and I think that they're stretching biblical principles in distorting. I think there's some distortion taking place in a lot of them, which is kind of frustrating. Because I'm one of those people that doesn't think we need feminism. I'm not a huge fan of labels. We label everything in our culture, right? Like,
we do.
We label how we eat, our diets are labeled. Like we label everything. When it comes to this issue, it's and women in the church, women in leadership. There's labels for everything, and it gets kind of convoluted, and then we have labels of labels, and there's subsections, and it's like at the end of the day, you're like,
but if we didn't
confusing.
have feminism, if feminism never existed, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
There's no way that we would be
That's true.
allowed to do
Yeah,
this.
that's true.
Like, there's no way. Like, we wouldn't be allowed to vote. We wouldn't be considered persons. We would have been married off very young.
And that's why I really think that feminism started as good. But I think to say that that's still the train that's going today, I think you're wrong.
Not
I
so
think
much.
that if it started on that track, yes, those things are excellent. You can't disagree with those things. They're biblical principles.
Yeah.
But what feminism as a whole, and generically speaking, I'm sure there's still branches of feminism that I do think are still based on equality.
Yeah.
But generically, secularly speaking, it's like the train has gone off the track and gone down a completely different route, where it's no longer, women have value and we're going to increase those values. It's now women must become like men, do like men. We don't want to have pregnancies, so we don't. We want to work a job all the time and not just be able to raise our kids. Or we have to. And so we do that. And not to say those things in themselves are wrong, but when you have an attitude behind it that is just for women being over men all the time, I think that's wrong. And I think that's not what the Bible says it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be an equal thing, exactly like what Galatians says.
Personally, what I really don't like, though, about Christianity for the last really long time is the unsavory reaction to feminism. I think it's gone too far, where now there's a whole movement in the church to oppress women once again.
Yes.
And not to the extreme degree where they're like chattel and we move back to a completely patriarchal society, although there are weird branches of the church that do that.
Yeah.
But there does tend to be this overreaction of like, oh, feminists, they're so not needed, or like women can't speak in church, or you're only good for speaking to children, or
that's your only role in the church.
Of a different country, which is so racist.
You can't have any leadership.
It's like so it can go down a really bad path, and I think that principle of overreactions in any direction is there's sin there. There's going to be destruction there, because you're allowing your emotions to run wild instead of really analyzing the issue and picking it through. So that's something to keep in mind too, where it's like, where you've seen kind of the extreme ways that feminism has gone, because there are some really extreme branches of feminism out there. And then there's extreme reactions to feminism where you're like, what is that? That's just as bad. It's just on the flip side.
Opposite.
And it's unfortunate, because those are really what you hear about in the news, in media, is the extreme reactions, as it is with like anything. You always hear about the extremist of those reactions. So it's unfortunate, because it can like really skew your view on what feminism even is. But I guess like even generically speaking, that it does tend to be one of those extremes.
I think it's really interesting that when you're looking at Genesis, our original creation, God makes a man and a woman, and they're very connected. They're completely interdependent. You can't separate woman from man or man from woman, and in order for them to have a family, they need each other, and that's not different today. We still have that, and it seems like feminism is trying to just break that interdependence, and that's where my frustration is. It's breaking that interdependence that God created.
But that interdependence has already been broken. It was broken by Adam and Eve, because then all of a sudden, like in the Garden of Eden, they were both made to keep the garden. They weren't farming, they were keeping a garden that was already growing on its own. And so the idea then, with them procreating, they would just have more garden keepers. But as soon as they fell and they got ousted from the Garden of Eden, then Eve had to raise children, and Adam had to create food from the ground. And so then those roles really became really divided, and there was a lot of fighting against you. Then you see how human history went. And so it's like today we're just not living in an ideal situation. It's just a really difficult thing. I appreciate early feminism attempting to fix the scale of them being like, wait a second, just because we stay at home and we have babies doesn't mean we're not human. And it doesn't mean that if my father dies, I shouldn't be able to inherit his property.
And even with that, like that was something that I was kind of looking more into when we were sort of studying the topic of feminism. And like I feel like Paul always gets he gets ragged on, right, from feminists today. But really, he's quite doing the opposite in a lot of what he talks about. Like there's a verse in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 4, where it talks about the wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. Everyone stops there. But the next line is like the most revolutionary thing at the time, because it says in the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but it yields it to his wife. And like in the time that Paul's writing, many of the men and things in that culture would go and they would have slaves. And often they would have sex with these slaves, and it was fine. Everyone did it. So for Paul to be like, no, you are each other's authority. You have to have that. And giving her, like she would have barely been a person at the time, right? They would have had no property, nothing. To say that you have authority over a man's body is like mind-blowing. But Paul always gets ragged on for being so, you know,
you kind of have to wonder what he would say today. Like for what we say about his writings today, you kind of wonder what his reaction would be to that.
Yes. And I think too, Jesus gets pulled into this battle so often.
A lot,
and it's used by both extremes, where you have feminists going, Jesus was a hardcore feminist. And then you have anti-feminists going, Jesus hated women. Jesus only chose men for his disciples.
Exactly.
Like for his 12 disciples. We know there was women in the other disciples, but they don't count.
But they're
only
not the real
12
disciples.
Count. So you have people like throwing Jesus around too, and you're like, oh, guys, calm down.
And that's why I think like even like when we ask like, is God a feminist? It can be like dangerous sometimes, like to ask those kinds of things, because you know, labels.
People get whipped up really easily
so
and
fast.
Taking things out of context.
And with feminism too, though, there is a lot of issues within that people do have, like they're very personal issues. So for people to have extreme reactions, it's like I'm not surprised by it when people do have big reactions.
But really cool about Jesus is like for his time being revolutionary as well, it would have been quite offensive to many of the rabbis of his time for Jesus to allow women to be his disciples, but we know that he did. And in the Gospels, for example, not only does it say that Jesus was provided for by many of his women disciples who are quite wealthy, but that also he allowed Mary to study at his feet. And if Mary was studying at his feet, and that was just a case study that one of the authors of the Gospels just wrote down, because it contrasted a traditional woman's role, which was Martha, and she's getting everything ready, and she's like, Jesus, tell my sisters to stop listening to you and help me. And Jesus was like, we can wait to eat. She's doing what's more important right now. Come and learn from me. And that statement at the time, excusing her from her traditional role so that she could become a disciple and sit with the men and learn at Jesus' feet, is an amazing concept. And women in Judaism were encouraged to learn, but it wasn't quite that extreme. That Jesus had a lot of women followers, and that's really, really cool. Really cool.
It's one of those things where when you look at the relationship between Jesus and many of the situations with women, I've never read through the Gospels and thought, you know what, I see a difference between men and women based on what his life was like. Like he's never, you know, oh, you're just a woman, whatever. Like the first the first people to see him after his resurrection are women. He goes to the woman at the well. There's the woman who washes his feet with the hair. There's the woman who caught in adultery. Like there's just story after story of him dealing with women. in such a revolutionary way that I can see how people would say he's a feminist.
But he's not so extreme that he makes some of his 12 disciples women, because that would have been super offensive.
That would have been
and
super
he was pretty offensive anyway.
Like
the offense of the
he
cross.
had his moments.
He had his moments.
Yeah. Well, they wanted to kill him the entire time, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you think that as far as the label of feminism, and I realize that it's kind of hard because feminism has changed over time and it means different things to different people. But for Christians who want to adopt the label or who don't, do you think there's kind of a right or wrong answer there? Should Christians be considered part of the feminist movement, or should we abstain completely or partially?
That's a good question. I think it is a hard one to answer because of it changing over time. Like if I was going to choose a label to label myself, feminism is not going to be one of them.
Right.
It's not going to be one that, considering how much it has changed, it's not going to be one that I could put all my eggs in this basket and be fine with. I would have a lot of like uneasiness about what it represents today.
Right.
So is it one that I choose today? Personally, no.
Right.
But again, like going back to what feminism started as, and the things that they fought for, you don't want that to become unrecognized either. And you don't want to just sweep that out because of what it's become today.
Yeah.
That's such a key and important thing, and something, again, that starts in the Bible. It's started as, biblical principles being put into place, and the value that God has placed on each of us as individuals. It's not something to be overlooked. So that's hard. It really depends on how you define it. But if I'm just going with a single word and I get no explanations, no, it's not a word I'm going with.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that we need to be really careful with labeling ourselves with any human movement.
Yeah.
Any human movement. I think we should stick with Christian. That was a label that was derogatorily given to us in thousands of years ago, and I think we should probably just stick with that.
They wore it proudly and...
Yeah, follower of Christ, and then I think that there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing a label under there that says for equality, like equality of races, equality of humans, equality of gender. So, I mean, because that is a biblical principle. We believe that God created humans. We believe, and we're male and female, and we have equal value. And as Christians, no matter what you are, whether you're male or female or whatever, where you come from in the world, whatever your skin color is, you have the right to become a child of God and an heir of heaven, and that's amazing. We're all going to inherit heaven, and because I'm a woman doesn't mean I'm going to inherit less heaven, or that I can only inherit heaven if I'm married. Thank God, it squeaked in there. Like, no,
or
that's
if you
not
have children.
My only value is if I can have kids. No. So there's nothing wrong with qualifying what it means to be a Christian when you're talking about feminism.
Totally.
We have to do that anyway, I think.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because the term Christian has been thrown around so liberally.
Yeah.
But
really
even
good
Jesus
point.
had to do that. When they asked him if he was the Messiah, they had so many different expectations for the Messiah. He had to be like, yes, but, and then kind of explain himself.
Yeah.
And you see that with John the Baptist too, like with asking him, are you Elijah? And he's like, well, no, not physically.
But this is what we're talking about. So,
So, yeah.
That's great. Anything else to add there?
No,
Anything for you?
No.
good.
No, it was great. Well, if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you guys check us out on Facebook and our website, which is BibleDiscoveryTV.com. And we hope to see you guys next time. Thank you for joining the discussion we've thrown on the table today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, you can give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest content from Bible Discovery TV. You can also find On the Table on Facebook with our latest episodes and some bonus content.